Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Dead Man Speaks by Lisa Jones Gentry, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, New York, 1987. The acrid smell of burning coke was everywhere, seeping into the soft plush of furniture, burrowing into the silky carpet and the smooth walls. It stinks, but I didn't mind 'cause there was nothing like it. Opened up the mind, made a man forget himself, and God knows I needed that. Her hand rubbed my cheek. Tiny, soft hands. My mind drifted back over the evening. It had only been a few hours earlier, but now it seemed like an eternity. Wall Street faces flowed past me, my colleagues, my friends, my enemies. Congratulations, Clive. Great work. Stupendous fourth quarter. My enemies surrounded me, whispering words of praise, silently wishing that I'd fall. I wanted to close my mind on everything and walk away from my life, but I couldn't. One more deal, that's all. Just this last one, and I'd be free. For good. I noticed him watching me, envy creeping around the corners of his eyes, maneuvering his way over to me as if he'd been holding back, waiting for the moment to drop it. We need to talk. I looked through him, a short, dark squirrel of a man with wide-set eyes and a large nose. His wrinkled, bald head made him look older than his 40 years. His body quivered with anxiousness as he sidled closer to me. I wondered, for the first time, how I'd ever brought him in, why I'd ever trusted him. Not now. But Clive, we'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow may be too late. Why? It's just that, well, I got a call from... And he lowered his voice. Not here, I interrupted. My enemies surrounded me. I couldn't afford even one slip, one minor indiscretion. Now I hissed angrily, more at myself for ever making myself vulnerable to his manipulation. I told you we'd talk tomorrow. But what about later tonight? I'm leaving this city. I won't have time. He rocked back on the sides of his shoes, the way he always did when he was angry, but he knew better than to say anything, pleading, almost begging me to listen to him, to give him the dignity he thought he deserved. But they want to increase their position, and we'd have to make the trade tomorrow morning. So then just do it. I turned my back on him, leaving a trail of whispers behind me. I slipped into my car, the creamy leather seats enfolding me as I whizzed down the expressway. The smell of the ocean filled the car, and an aphrodisiac teasing my senses. I thought about her waiting for me, opening the door, and then I saw her face, the light green eyes clouded against her golden taffy-colored skin, the thick mop of dark curly hair framing her face. How often had I held her? How often had I seen her lips part in that same half-teasing, half-defiant smile? Hi. I grabbed her, wanting to make love to her before I told her, but she smiled playfully, pushing me away. Look what I got. She pulled out a gram of icy white Coke, licking the edge of the paper hungrily. To celebrate. Would she still want to celebrate when I told her that I'm leaving, but not with her? All the years between us, but I still can't do it. I still can't surrender my soul to her. Would she understand this time, too? Here, Clive. It's good. A sucking noise. The dull light glinted against the pipe, trembling ever so slightly. She must really be fucked up. Almost as good as the first time, remember? That's what she always said. A nice long one. My eyes shut tightly, letting the feeling curl over me like a woman's touch, soft, seductive, and always so deadly. I'm going to get some champagne. She leaned down over me, kissing me slowly. I could taste the Coke on her lips. Her hand rubbed my cheek. Tiny, soft hands. My eyes followed her small body weaving out of the room, down the hallway, and into the kitchen. I closed my eyes again, going over every detail of my plan in my mind for the 100th or maybe 1,000th time. I'd lost track now. Every step sharpened by time and urgency. One more week, and I'd have the final payment and my freedom from a life that was no longer mine. I was finally starting to relax. The blow was starting to kick in. It always took longer when I was tensed up, but now the tingly feeling was rushing through me. A sharp, searing pain was suddenly tearing through my back, ripping the breath out of me. I doubled over. It felt as if someone had taken 1,000 knives and exploded them in me. And it was all a blur except for blood everywhere. On my chest, covering my hands, the white carpet in the room's empty. And I realized I'd been fucking shot. Somebody's... But now the room was spinning. I knew this was it. The dark curtains were enveloping me, and then the light, like the light at home, soft, beckoning, taking me to the place I thought I'd forgotten. And then I'd smiled. I understood now, all the years, all the money, the lies. But you could never escape. It would always pull you back. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Hendersonville, Mississippi, 1957. Clive, 4 years old. How's my little Clive? Daddy scooped me up as if I were a bundle of soft rags. I laughed and buried my head in his warm chest, which smelled of tobacco and sweat. He lifted me up so high. Sitting right there on top of his shoulders, I was 10 feet tall. I looked into his face, dark brown and smooth as stone, the kind I'd throw in the muddy puddles of water out back. And when Daddy laughed, it was that big laugh that I knew even God must hear, shaking the sides of the house. Until we'd heard Ma's voice, always the same. Lorenzo, put him down. Clive, I told you to stop horsing around in the morning with your father. Ma almost never smiled. In fact, I can't remember when she ever smiled, except maybe in church when the preacher got going. But that was only on Sunday. The rest of the day, she was a tall, thin woman with a long, hard line where the smile should be on her face. I don't think she was really sad, maybe just mad, especially when she touched me with her hard red hands. Ma worked at a big place in town, sewing buttons on hundreds of dresses. So when she got home at night, usually after it was already dark, she'd bang around in the kitchen making dinner for Daddy and me. She hated doing it. And then she'd eat without saying a word. If he gets sick, I'm the one who's got to stay home and take care of him. And here you're like to freeze him to death, put him back in the bed. But Ma, I want to get up. Sarah, the boy's not a baby anymore. And he's not growed yet either. Without saying another word, she'd walk back into the tiny bedroom, muttering something to herself. Me and Daddy smiled, sharing our private joke. Daddy wrapped me up in a blanket, the big red one that had Miller's dry goods on it. It had a big hole in the bottom, so Daddy tucked it up under me and carried me over to the leaky furnace. Ready, partner? Yep. Let's see what we can get out of her. He reared back and gave the heater a big kick. The heater made these grunting, gurgly kinds of noises just before one big wheeze and then a blast of warm, dry air. Guess she's in a real good mood today. Feels pretty hot. Daddy took my hands in his huge ones, and we stood over the heater together. The heat was tickling me, running all up under my hands, shoving away the last little bits of cold. And I didn't even care that Ma never smiled at me. Chapter 3, 1962. Shh! Aw, shut up, Clive. You always bossin'. Look, if you don't shut up, somebody'll hear us. Well, I don't care. Don't think this is such a good idea anyway. What if... I shoved Jessie in the ribs to be quiet. Fat Mr. Arbunk was heaving across the street. He stopped for a minute and looked over in our direction, squinting in the early morning sun. I motioned for Andy and Jessie to get closer so he wouldn't see us behind the magnolia bushes. Mr. Arbunk scratched his wormy-looking head, tilted it toward us, then scratched his butt. Andy sniggered. I glared at him. We had to keep real quiet. We curled up farther under the bush so the only thing you could see was the green leaves and big droopy white magnolia flowers. But I wasn't looking at them. My eyes were fixed on the object of this intense secrecy. Across the street next to the creaky post office, the gleaming, new playground. A slide, the biggest piece of shiny steel I'd ever seen, just waiting for me to glide down at 100 miles an hour, and the swings with the red leather seats dangling lazily in the wind. Surrounding what had to be the closest thing to heaven I'd ever seen was a nasty-looking black wire fence with whites only stamped on it. The playground was empty. It was early Saturday morning, so none of the white kids were up yet, just as I planned it. post office wasn't even open. And except for Mr. Arbunk, who'd disappeared down the narrow alley, the town's main street was completely empty. Further down the same street was our other playground. The swings completely broken, the slide not even worth looking at, much less using, and the dirty rusted fence that surrounded it had colored only plastered across it. First time I saw their playground, I knew I was going to use it. I just had to get my troops in line. That's what I called Jesse and Andy when we played war with the Jeffers boys. I was always the general, and Jesse and Andy were my troops, so I guess I just got used to thinking of them like that. I motioned for them to follow me, finger pressed against my lips telling them to be quiet. They were a little chicken. I really had to keep them in line, but this was the best thing we'd done yet. It was worth everything. I whispered, "Okay, just follow me." I looked to the right, then the left. The big clock in the square toned 7 times. I froze. Jesse and Andy scurried back to the magnolia bush. Disgustedly, I motioned for them to get back over here. They crawled out slowly, looking around. Then they reluctantly followed me across the street. I don't know how many times I thought about this, climbing over the black fence, hoisting myself over the top. I was a pirate capturing the prize flag. Prize ship. "Come on, last one in's a rotten egg." I ran over to the slide and just about jumped up the 10 steps to the top. Looking down over the town, I was the king. Whoosh! The wind sung around my ears, whipping across my head. "Come on, Handy, get your big fat butt over here. Jesse's got you beat." "You worry about yourself. I'm right behind y'all." Andy clunked up the steps of the slide, plopping down on the cold steel and flying down after me. Again and again. I don't remember how many times, but every time I did it, I was on top of the world, and nobody, not nobody, could stop me now. "Why, you little pickaninnies, what the hell you doing in there?" My heart literally jumped out of my stomach into my mouth. I don't think I was ever so scared. Even when Ma went out back and got the switch, and I knew she was going to lay into me. This was different because this was the white man, or the Ophé, or the boogeyman, like Daddy sometimes called him when they weren't listening. And everybody knew what the boogeyman did to you. "I said, what the hell are you little colors doing there?" My mind suddenly started working again. I ran around the slide and in between the swings with Jesse and Andy right behind me. There was another gate in the back. If we could just make it there before the white man got over there. "Just like a bunch of dumb niggers. You really think you can outrun me?" He heaved over to the fence, blocking the way, but I wasn't giving up. I kicked him as hard as I could in the knee, yelling to Andy and Jesse, "Run!" "Why, you little sheet! There's niggers in the white playground!" He shouted at the top of his mean, squeaky voice. "There's niggers in the white playground!" Andy cried, and Jesse looked like he was about to start. "I told you we shouldn't have." Suddenly, the whole square was filled with angry white men. You'd thought we'd killed somebody or something. Slap. A fat white hand smacked me across my face as I tried to scamper away. Another white man had already nabbed Jesse and Andy. And the last thing I remember was thinking maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. "Look at them little niggers, just like little monkeys over there." "Yeah, throw 'em a chicken bone. You knows how niggers likes chicken." A loud, raspy laugh belched out of the dirty sheriff who sat in front of the jail like as he whipped a greasy chicken bone through the bars. Me, Andy, and Jesse were huddled in the corner of the stinking jail. It smelled like piss and vomit. That's 'cause in the corner was this drunk colored man. He must have thrown up in his sleep because little pieces of dried vomit were stuck to his face and to the front of his torn shirt. They'd thrown us in here after they pulled us out of the playground. Andy and Jesse just kept crying the whole time and asking for their mamas. I don't know why, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. I guess I just knew that somehow we were going to get out of this. I mean, they couldn't keep us here forever. The colored man in the corner hiccuped and opened one eye, tipping dazedly over in our direction. Jesse wiped the tears off his cheeks and hissed to me angrily. "It's all your fault. I told you I didn't want to do it. I told you. Now they're going to leave us in here." Andy jumped and shoved me. "Yeah, now they'll never let us see our mamas again." I knew we'd get out, but I couldn't think of anything to say to Andy and Jesse to convince them. I just hugged my knees against my chest and looked at the fat, drunk man in the corner snoring again. He sounded like a sick horse. The deputy sheriff pressed his pink face against the bars of the jail and cracked up, listening to us. "Well, now, I guess that'll teach you all darkies to stay in your place. Don't you know you can't do like white folks can?" The other sheriff spat some tobacco in our direction. A big wad of smelly dark brown tobacco landed right by my foot. "That's the problem with the nigger nowadays. With all them sit-ins and whatnot, they really starting to think they's equal to us." Jingling his keys, the sheriff gnawed on his tobacco some more and waddled over to the jail and stood next to the deputy. His breath smelled like chitlins and sour lemonade. "It'll be a cold day in hell for any of yous ever have what the white man's got. You remember that. Stay in your place and you be all right. But you start thinking you can have what's ours and only ours, and well, little niggers, I guess you'll just end up right where you are now, under the goddamn jailhouse." Right under the jailhouse, all right, for playing in their playground. Or dead. They never did like us to play with their toys. I guess that's why I'm sitting in a pool of blood now. My future, my plans, my life all ebbing out in a bloody mess around me. All for playing in their playground. And now the thoughts are rushing, and I hear the voices, but where is she, and how could she leave me? Did she? No. I couldn't believe that. It must be them. And the voices in my head that won't stop. The spinning wheels of my past rushing at me like 1,000 crazed horses. Snort, snort, he. The deputy laughed some more, and then turned his skinny butt to us and farted, a big, fat, disgusting one. And in that moment, I knew that I was getting out of Hendersonville, out of the South, out of everything that could ever remind me of this place. And I wasn't scared anymore because I knew that there was a whole lot more out there than the stinking jail, and I knew I was getting far away from there. "Well, looky who's here if it ain't your mama's." "Ma!" Andy and Jessie jumped up. The three of us ran to the bars of the jail as Mrs. Caters and Mrs. Lewis ran over to the jail. Only Ma wasn't there. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I always thought she didn't like me, but "There's my boy." Daddy's big voice boomed out from the corner. "Daddy!" I don't know why now, but I cried. I mean, really cried. Daddy had come for me, and I just couldn't stop crying.